Okay, it's been a while since I've been able to record anything since I've been so busy with finishing up classes and grading things and going to a conference. Finally getting back to it though. And I was out here in the darkling woods over there recording a video from the other series that I have about the unspoken sermons by George MacDonald. Kind of wish I had found this lovely podium for them, but when I was recording those, I was reading a bit of Paradise Lost, and it was just too good to not make a little spin-off here in this series, talking about a bit of Paradise Lost and connecting it to a couple other things. And specifically, I want to read a part from Paradise Lost that is about cursing the sun. Since we have the sun out right now, which is a treat here in December, I figured we might as well curse the sun while it's upon us. So I'm going to start with Paradise Lost, because that's where I was so excited to get to. So this scene from Paradise Lost takes place with Satan having already been kicked out of heaven and fallen into hell and flown out of hell and through chaos to get to earth. And he's looking at paradise and looking at the sun from earth, and the sun reminds him of the brightness that he had before and the power that he had before he rebelled, and he therefore doesn't like the sun very much. So I'm just going to read what his thoughts are here. He begins to wonder if he made the right choice in rebelling, wondering if he had a choice at all to rebel, or if it was just in his nature that was given to him, so it wasn't his choice at all. And he wonders if he could repent and then be taken back into heaven and forgiven. And we'll see what his decision is in a moment. But all of this is just him talking and monologuing and mulling things over privately to himself. And I think we might even get to a part where we'll get to a part where he's talking about his comrades, his fellow, I guess, devils that he led astray. And so just know that he's not talking to them, because he hides these thoughts from them. They think that he's their fearless leader, and he's having doubts himself. So anyway, I'm just going to get to reading because it's so good. And he's going to start off immediately with addressing the sun and his thoughts about it. O thou that with surpassing glory crowned look'st from thy sole dominion like the God of this new world, at whose sight all the stars hide their diminished heads. To thee I call, but with no friendly voice, and add thy name, O sun, to tell thee how I hate thy beams, that bring to my remembrance from what state I fell, how glorious once above thy sphere, till pride and worse ambition threw me down, warring in heaven against heaven's matchless king. Ah, wherefore he deserved no such return from me, whom he created what I was, in that bright eminence, and with his good upbraided none. Nor was his service hard. What could be less than to afford him praise, the easiest recompense, and pay him thanks? How do? Yet all his good proved ill in me, and wrought but malice. Lifted up so high, I stained subjection, and thought one step higher would set me highest, and in a moment quit the debt immense of endless gratitude so burdensome, still paying, still to owe. Forgetful what from him I still received, and understood not that a grateful mind by owing owes not, but still pays at once indebted and discharged. What burden then? So before I move on for a little bit, I'm going to say that he's about to imagine that maybe if he were a lesser angel, he would not have been so tempted to strike at the throne and become the highest. But because he was so high, he feels like he was almost fated to try to overthrow God. So he wonders what would happen if he were lesser. Oh, had his powerful destiny ordained me some inferior angel, I had stood then happy. No unbounded hope had raised ambition. Yet why not? Some other power as great might have aspired, in me though mean, drawn to his part. But other powers as great fell not, but stand unshaken from within or from without, to all temptations armed. Hadst thou the same free will and power to stand? Thou hadst. Whom hadst thou then, or what to accuse? But heaven's free love dealt equally to all. Be then his love accursed, since love or hate to me alike it deals eternal woe. Nay, cursed be thou, talking about himself. Nay, cursed be thou, since against his thy will chose freely what it now so justly rues. Me miserable, which way shall I fly infinite wrath and infinite despair? Which way I fly is hell, myself am hell, and in the lowest deep a lower deep still threatening to devour me opens wide, to which the hell I suffer seems a heaven. Oh, then at last relent. Is there no place left for repentance? None for pardon left? None left but by submission, and that word disdain forbids me, and my dread of shame among the spirits beneath, whom I seduced with other promises and other vaunts, than to submit, boasting I could subdue the omnipotent. Ay me, they little know how dearly I buy the boast so vain, under what torment inwardly I groan. While they adore me on the throne of hell with diadem and scepter high advanced, the lower still I fall, only supreme in misery. Such joy ambition finds. So he's about to start wondering what would happen if he repented and if he could be restored to power, but he doesn't see that working out. I had to pause because Bob was walking through the leaves. So, he says, but say I could repent and could obtain by act of grace my former state, how soon would height recall high thoughts, how soon unsafe feigned submission swore, ease would recant vows made in pain as violent and void. For never can true reconcilement grow where wounds of deadly hate have pierced so deep, which could but lead me to worse relapse and heavier fall. So should I purchase dear, short intermission bought with double smart. This knows my punisher, aka God. Therefore, so far from granting he, as I from begging peace. All hope excluded thus, behold instead of us outcast, exiled, his new delight, mankind created, and for him this world. So farewell hope, and with hope farewell fear, farewell remorse, all good to me is lost, evil be thou my good. By thee at least divided empire with heaven's king I hold by thee, and more than half perhaps will reign, as man ere long, and his new world shall know. And it continues on to talk about how, while cursing the son and bewailing his fate, and bemoaning his lost power and his ambition and where his ambition has led him, his face has been changing. Satan's face has been expressing the sorrow. Let's see, it says, thus while he spake, each passion dimmed his face, thrice elonged with pale ire, envy, and despair. So he's really struggling with this, and it's showing. And because his facial expression is showing his disguise, I think he's maybe in the disguise of an angel at this moment, a non-fallen angel, his disguise falters, and so Uriel, I believe, another angel, sees him and notices that he's not who he claims to be, and so reports him. But now we have Satan looking at paradise, at the newly created humanity, and having decided to make evil his good. But I won't spoil what happens after that. But that's a little bit of Paradise Lost by John Milton. Lovely book, and I thought I would move on to something connected with that, in my mind at least. Another wonderful book, one of my other favorites, called Moby Dick by Herman Melville. So if you haven't read Moby Dick, one, you should. People act like it's some dry, scholarly, intimidating book, but really it's quite hilarious and just wonderful. And maybe that's because I don't get all the depths of it, but I get a lot out of it, and I also have a lot of fun reading it. So you should just give it a go if you haven't yet. But I'll also summarize it a little bit, just to let you know where we are in this part that I'm reading. So Ahab is a captain of a ship called the Pequod, and he has an obsession with killing the white whale called Moby Dick. And so Ahab gets a crew to go whaling, like you would expect to go whaling, and collect a whole bunch of oil and sell it and make money. But he ends up hijacking his crew to go with him on his like vindictive quest to kill the whale. And the book is about what happens when he does that. So to give you a little more context, I'm going to pick up in chapter 118. But they're short chapters, so if you're going to read this, like, it's not that daunting. But just before this, in 117, Ahab has been warned by a member of his crew, Parsi, that he's going to die on this venture. And die by hemp is what the guy says, and that sounds like rope, and so he's like, I'm going to get hanged, so a gallows, and he's like, I'm going to be immortal then, there's no gallows here, and so I'm not worried about that, and he just brushes it off. But I'll start off right here. He's talking about the Japanese sea where they are, and the sun is on it. That unblinkingly vivid Japanese sun seems the blazing focus of the glassy ocean's immeasurable burning glass. The sky looks lacquered, clouds there are none, the horizon floats, and this nakedness of unrelieved radiance is as the insufferable splendors of God's throne. So, again, we're hearkening back to like celestial majesty, where Satan saw it and missed it because he had it once. Now, the narrator here is just describing the sun as reminding him of God's throne. Well, that Ahab's quadrant was furnished with colored glasses through which to take sight of that solar fire. So, swinging his seated form to the roll of the ship, and with his astrological-looking instrument placed his eye, he remained in that posture for some moments to catch the precise instant when the sun should gain its precise meridian. Meantime, while his whole attention was absorbed, the Parsi was kneeling beneath him on the ship's deck, and with face thrown up like Ahab's, was eyeing the same sun with him. Only the lids of his eyes half hooded their orbs, and his wild face was subdued to an earthly passionlessness. At length the desired observation was taken, and with his pencil upon his ivory leg, which was bitten off by Moby Dick, and with his pencil upon his ivory leg, Ahab soon calculated what his latitude must be at that precise instant. Then, falling into a moment's revelry, he again looked up towards the sun and murmured to himself, Thou sea mark, thou high and mighty pilot, thou tellest me truly where I am. But canst thou cast the least hint where I shall be? Or canst thou tell me where some other thing besides me is this moment living? Where is Moby Dick? This instant thou must be eyeing him. These eyes of mine look into the very eye that is even now beholding him. Aye, and into the eye that is even now equally beholding the objects on the unknown thither side of thee, thou sun. So now he's going to go on to address his quadrant, the tool that he's using to measure his position. Then gazing at his quadrant and handling one after the other its numerous cabalistic contrivances, he pondered again and muttered, Foolish toy, baby's plaything of haughty admirals and commodores and captains, the world brags of thee, of thy cunning and might. But what after all canst thou do but tell the poor pitiful point where thou thyself happenest to be on this wide planet, and the hand that holds thee? No, not one jot more. Thou canst not tell where one drop of water or one grain of sand will be tomorrow noon, and yet with thy importance thou insultest the sun. Science! Curse thee, thou vain toy, and cursed be all the things that cast man's eyes aloft to that heaven whose live vividness but scorches him, as these old eyes are even now scorched by thy light, O sun. Level by nature to earth's horizon are the glances of man's eyes, not shot from the crown of his head as if God had meant him to gaze on its firmament. Curse thee, thou quadrant, dashing it to the deck. No longer will I guide my earthly way by thee, the level ship's compass and the level dead reckoning, by log and by line, thee shall conduct me, and show me my place on the sea. I, lighting from the boat to the deck. Thus I trample thee, thou paltry thing that feebly points on high. Thus I split and destroy thee. As the frantic old man thus spoke and thus trampled, with his live and dead feet, a sneering triumph that seemed meant for Ahab, and a fatalistic despair that seemed meant for himself. These passed over the mute, motionless Parsee's face. Unobserved he rose and glided away, while, awestruck by the aspect of their commander, the seamen clustered together on the forecastle, till Ahab, troubledly pacing the deck, shouted, "To the braces! Up helm! Square in!" In an instant the yard swung round, and as the ship half-wheeled upon her heel, her 3 firm-seated, graceful masts erectly poised upon her long-ribbed hull, seemed as the 3 Horati pirouetting on one sufficient steed. Standing between the knightheads, Starbuck, another crewman, watched the Pequod's tumultuous way, and Ahab's also, as he went lurching along the deck. I have sat before the dense coal fire and watched it all aglow, full of its tormented, flaming life, and I have seen it wane at last, down, down to dumbest dust. Old man of oceans, of all this fiery life of thine, what will at length remain but one little heap of ashes? "Aye," cried Stubb, "but sea-coal ashes, mind ye that, Mr. Starbuck. Sea-coal, not your common charcoal." Well, well, I heard Ahab mutter, "Here someone thrusts these cards into these old hands of mine, swears that I must play them and no others. And damn me, Ahab, thou actest right. Live in the game and die it." Okay, wow. So that was maybe a lot, but it was, I think, fun to read. I think there's a lot of parallels you can draw between that and Satan's cursing of the sun. I guess here Ahab curses the sun and the quadrant that points him to the sun. And like Satan says, "Evil be thou my good," choosing a new guide than what he should, so Ahab says, "The level ship's compass and the level dead reckoning by log and by line, these shall conduct me." So he's saying that he's going to dispense with science and reason, these things that have been trusted by seamen for so long and are a true way of navigating, and instead he's just going to use his own dead reckoning and follow his guts wherever he needs to go or wherever he thinks he should go. So both of them have abandoned what is right for their own passions. Oh, and this reminds me of a line in The Fairy Queen, book 1. It might have just been the narrator saying it, but he said that the eye of reason was with rage yblent. And yblent just means blinded. So the eye of reason was blinded by rage. And that's, of course, a common theme in old literature. But basically, hi, Bob. But basically, reason helped control passions. And when you get into rage, or like Ahab's in a rage here, or Satan's in a rage there, you are blinded to reason. And I think that's a lovely thing to help us connect reason with virtue, which is, I think, a pretty classical thing to say. And we see in other books, I mean, the one thing that comes to mind is in C.S. Lewis's Perelandra. Lewis's demon character, I'll just leave it at that, puts on reason only as a tool to manipulate things to his end, but doesn't really have reason otherwise, because evil is in itself unreasonable. And reason is therefore kind of virtuous. And I hope these aren't too strong of things to be saying, but I think this plays out in a lot of classical literature. And I wish I had better thoughts about it, but I don't have time to figure those out now. I've got things to do. I just wanted to take a moment to step aside and read some fun things. I am enjoying expanding my knowledge and remembering good bits of literature here or there, and I hope to continue to do so and eventually be able to draw more connections and broader connections and flesh out my understanding of some of these concepts. Anyway, I don't know if you can see Bob, but he's sitting down there on my Paradise Lost, which I think is cute. But that's that, and the sun's going down, so I guess we scared it off with our curses. So I'll leave you to it, and I'm excited to be back.